Classification of accounts in accounting. So you have learned in your 11th standard there are total 3 accounts in accounting, and these 3 accounts, all the expenses, all the assets, all the losses, or all the purchase sales, or whatever you can say, it is classified into these 3 accounts. And these accounts are: first one, personal account. Here personal account means name of a person. It can be artificial person, it can be human being. Say for example XY, X, Mr. X, Mr. Y, Mr. Amar, Mr. Suresh, etc. So these are the considered as a personal account. Living being. And artificial person means name of institution. Say for example MS University. It is a personal account. It is an artificial person. So these all accounts come under the head of personal accounts. So in personal account, it can be living being, or it can be artificial person, non-artificial person, artificial person. All things, bank, SBI bank is also HDFC bank. These all banks, particular school, college, etc. This all comes under the head of personal account. Now, next classification is impersonal account. And impersonal account, again there are two classification. First one, real account. In real account, there are two types of real account: tangible real account and intangible real account. Tangible real account means you can touch, you can feel. These are all things are considered under tangible real account. Real account means plant and machinery, furniture, then purchase return, sales return. All this comes under the tangible real account. Whereas intangible real account means goodwill, patent, copyright, trademark, etc. comes under the intangible real account, which cannot be touched, which cannot be, you cannot see it. So that is why it is considered as intangible real account. And second impersonal account is nominal account. In nominal account, all the expenses and losses comes. All the incomes and gains will come under this account. Say for example, goods loss due to fire, loss of goods due to theft. If you are selling any goods and if any loss occurs, then it will comes under this loss. All the expenses, say for example stationery expense, miscellaneous expense, all these expenses comes under the nominal account. So mainly there are 3 accounts: personal account, real account, and nominal account. And we have classified this account, and on the basis of this account we have to frame rules of debit and credit. Rules for personal account: debit the receiver, credit the giver. This is the rule for personal account. If person is receiving, then that receiver should be debited, and if it is giver, then it should be credited. Let us understand with one example. Mr. X has purchased goods from Mr. Y on credit basis. Here, purchase account debit to Mr. Y account. Y is a giver, so that is why we are crediting account of Y, because he is the giver of the goods. So whenever a person is giver, then that account will be credited. And receiver means if you are selling the goods, say for example Mr. X sold the goods to Mr. Y on credit basis. Now in this account, in this case, Mr. Y is a receiver of the goods. So Mr. Y account debit to sell account. So this is the entry. So if person is receiver, then it should be debited. If person is giver, then it should be credited. Rules of real accounts: debit what comes into the business, credit what goes out of business. If something comes to the business, it should be debited. If something goes out of the business, then it should be credited. Purchase of goods of rupees 5,000 on cash basis. Now in this transaction, what is coming into the business and what is going out of the business. So in this transaction, you have made the purchase of goods of rupees 5,000 on a cash basis. So goods comes into your business and cash goes out of your business. So which account should be debited and which account should be credited? So here purchase account will be debited as goods comes into the business, and cash account should be credited as cash goes out of the business. So that is why we have to understand this concept of rules of real account. Now next is rules of nominal account. In nominal account, debit the expenses and losses, credit incomes and gains. If there is a expense and loss, then it should be debited. Say for example, telephone bill of rupees 2,000 paid. Then what is the entry for this? Here telephone bill is a expense, and as it is a expense, it should be debited. So that is why telephone bill account debit to cash account, as cash goes out of the business and it is a cash is a real account. So that is why we have classified it is a credit. So what is the entry? Telephone bill account debit to cash account. Credit incomes and gains. That means if there is some income or gains, say for example dividend received from a company. So now what is the entry for that? Cash account debit to dividend account. Here dividend is an income, so it is credited, and in that way this rule applies credit incomes and gains. So these are the three rules for personal account, real account and nominal account. Before passing any entry, you have to identify in which account a particular transaction falls, and then these rules should be applied, and by applying this rule, proper account should be debited or credited as per the situation of the transaction. Pass journal entries of the following transactions in the books of Arvind of Ahmedabad for January 20. CGST 9%, SGST 9% are applicable to the business transaction of Arvind. At the same time, IGST 18% is applicable. GST is not included in the following transactions. Pass journal entries by adding applicable GST. So here two three things we can make out from this instruction. First one is GST rate, that is CGST and SGST. So if it is a intrastate transaction, then CGST and SGST is chargeable. In if it is a interstate transaction, then IGST is applicable. And here Arvind is in Ahmedabad, so he has taken the registration in Gujarat, so SGST Act is applicable to him. So on the basis of different transaction, we have to pass different kinds of entry. First one, 2020 January 1, goods of rupees 15,000 sold to Kesav of Kesod and payment is received by check. So from this we have to pass the entry, but before passing entry we have to specify nature of transaction. Here nature of transaction, interstate or intrastate, that you have to decide. So Kesav is in Kesod and Arvind is in Ahmedabad. So both are located in the same state. So it is a intrastate transaction. Second important thing that you have to decide from the transaction, that whether it is a cash transaction or credit transaction. So from the transaction we can make out payment is already made by check. So it is a cash transaction and not a credit transaction. So on the basis of this information, you have to think your entry in your mind. I will provide the entry, but before I provide the entry, you should Be ready with your answer. So answer is date January 21 January, bank account debit 17,700, to sales account 15,000, to CGST output payable 1,350, to SGST output payable account 1,350. How this 1,350 comes? It is nothing but it is 9% of 15,000 CGST and 9% of 15,000 SGST. So this 1,350 comes. Why word is like that? CGST output payable. That means you had made some output and that output is taxable, and now you are collecting some tax from the client or customer, and this is your liability. So that is why it is a payable account. This 1,350 plus 1,350 that you have to deposit, that is Arvind has to deposit with the government. So total 2,700 is the liability of Arvind, and he has to deposit this amount to the government in the next month. So this way total amount of 17,700 comes. 15,000 plus 1,350 plus 1,350. January 2, goods of rupees 20,000 sold to Vinod Bhai of Valsad for cash. So in this, first of all, we have to decide nature of transactions. Nature of transaction, whether it is credit transaction, whether it is cash transaction, whether it is interstate transaction, or it is intrastate transactions. So Arvind Bhai is selling to Vinod Bhai of Valsad, and Arvind Bhai is in Ahmedabad. So both the place are located in the Gujarat, and here clearly mentioned that it is sold for cash. So that is why we can say that it is a cash transaction, and as location of recipient is within the Gujarat and supplier is also within the Gujarat, so it is a intrastate transaction. So that is why on the basis of this we can pass the following entry. Cash account debit 23,600 as it is sold for cash. So 23,600 you are going to receive. To sales account 20,000, that is the net amount. To CGST output payable account 1,800. To SGST output payable account 1,800. So if you make 9% of 20,000, it will come to 1,800. And again, once again, why it is a payable? Because this 1,800 of CGST and 1,800 of SGST, Arvind Bhai has to deposit to the government within due date. It is a liability of a Arvind Bhai to deposit the same amount that he has received from the customer to the department. So this way we can pass the entry of the second transaction. January 5, goods of rupees 30,000 sold to Rafia of Vadodara. Railway freight rupees 1,000 and rupees 1,000 of wages paid on her behalf. So here, along with the selling of the goods, there are additional expenses incurred with the goods. So we have to add these additional expenses into the cost of the goods. Why? Because these expenses are paid by Arvind on her behalf. So whenever Arvind will take any amount from the customer, he will take 30,000 plus 1,000 plus 1,000 of wages. So that is why 32,000 is to be collected from Rafia by Arvind. Now identify nature of transaction. Here it is a credit transaction because whether goods are sold for cash, and or not, whether payment is received or not, that is not given. A name of a customer or client is given, but railway freight and wages are paid on her behalf. That means this part we consider as a uh, cash part. So that is why it is a partly cash transaction and partly credit transaction. So now next question is, that is whether it is interstate transaction or intrastate transaction. So we can make out that both are Ahmedabad and Vadodara, place of supplier and place of recipient, both are located in the same state. So that is why we can say that it is a intrastate movement of the goods, and railway freight and wages are paid. That is not to be considered for the deciding inter or intrastate. So overall, we can say that it is a credit transaction and intrastate transaction. So entry is Raffia account debit 37,760, to sales account 30,000, to cash account 2,000, as 2,000 is included of railway freight and and wages, that is 1,000, 1,000. Why it is in cash? Because it is paid in cash. To CGST output payable account 2,880. Now you have to make 32,000, 9% of 32,000. So if you make 9% of 32,000, it will come to 22,880, and to SGST output payable account 2,880. So this is the way we can make the entry of the second transaction. January 10, goods of rupees 15,000 sold to Hemant of Delhi and payment received by check. Here payment is received by check, so it is a cash transaction. And then next question that we have to give here, whether it is a interstate transaction or intrastate transaction. So Arvind Bhai is in Gujarat, whereas Hemant is in Delhi. So it is a transaction between one state and another UT with state assembly. Transaction between state and UT with state assembly. So it is considered as interstate transaction, as it is between two different state and UT. Now, which tax is applicable? CGST or UTGST or IGST? So answer is IGST. So both the answer are clear now. It is a cash transaction and it is a interstate transaction, and it is a transaction of sale. So that is why we can make out that entry is like that. Bank account debit, as amount is received in check 17,700, and this amount is nothing but included. GST amount is included in this amount. To sales account 15,000, to IGST output payable account 2,700. So this is the entry. Now IGST output payable. So here the liability of IGST is on Arvind Bhai, and that amount is to deposited by Arvind Bhai to the department. Now next one, goods of rupees 20,000 sold to Ria of Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh. Now here, what is the nature of transaction? First answer is it is a credit transaction, but because nothing is said about the payment, whether payment is received or not, there is nothing is said, and name of a person is given. And second one, whether it is interstate or intrastate. So here Arvind Bhai is in Gujarat and Ria is in Bhopal. So it is a transaction between one state to another state. So here CGST or SGST is applicable or IGST is applicable. So answer is here also, as it is a transaction between two states. So that is why we can say that IGST is applicable and following entry can be passed. First one, RE account debit 23,600 to sales account 20,000 to IGST output payable account 3,600. 3,600 if you make 18% of 20,000, because rate of IGST is 18%. So 18% of 20,000 is 3,600. So if you make total of this 20,000 and 3,600, it will come to 23,600.